On this episode of IT Unplugged, we're going to ask the question, is the customer really always right?
At M2 Technology, we're on a mission to make IT accessible to everyone. Join us on our journey to demystify the ever-evolving world of business technology. Are you ready to get unplugged?
Welcome back to IT Unplugged. I'm Brandon.
I'm Steven.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about customer service in IT, how to not really be overbearing, but then still be proactive, because there's kind of a fine line between that. And Steven, I'm excited to talk to you about this because something I noticed about working with you is your customer service is like top notch. You know, it's one of those things that we didn't like. I kind of expected it, but I just like see it in person. I'm like, oh yeah, I never have to worry about this. It's great.
Well, I mean, I've worked in the service industry. I've jumped around quite a bit, so I've gotten a lot of exposure. So I've gotten a bit of perspective on when you're talking with someone of what to expect.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, as long as you're keeping in touch with people, at the sake of not being overbearing, checking in with people. You don't want to check in every other day saying, "Hey, you having a problem?" I found that 2-week mark is that good minimum.
Sure.
So, like, some people follow up every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, as long as you know how to talk to people and you've been in that position before, I found it super comfortable.
Yeah, I like that you brought up that you've been in the service industry, and that maybe kind of like helps that customer service aspect, because like I bartended since I've been 18 years old, right? And then all through college, and worked in restaurants and stuff. It makes a huge difference when you have to walk up to a table or start a conversation with someone and serve them, and having hundreds and hundreds of those interactions. It's like, oh, this is second nature now eventually. And
Exactly.
Even though that sometimes you get a bad one. I guess like they just have bad interactions over and over, or maybe they're having a bad day, but
I mean, it's always a possibility. I mean, if you've ever waited on a table, Brandon has, I have,
Yeah.
We know how it goes. You never know what to expect. So you pretty much have to be ready for anything.
Yeah.
You have to be happy to help them.
Yeah. So what's your, since we're talking about food, what's the secret sauce for customer service when it's providing top-notch IT support?
Typically a Thousand Island dressing with
Oh,
pickle
here we-
relish. Oh, you saw
we
that
go.
coming. You
Here we
saw
go.
that
What's
coming.
Thousand Island on? What burger again? Is that the? Oh, it's the Big Mac, right?
I mean, everywhere that has a secret sauce, it's always Thousand Island.
Really?
It
Yeah.
always is.
I think that's like what the Big Mac is. It's just Thousand Islands. I like discovered that one day. I hope it's right. And I'm like, that's not a secret at all. That's at the grocery store.
Yeah.
But anyways. Okay.
Anyways,
Anyways.
to actually talk about it, I mean, when you're working with people, you have to build that relationship. You have to have that rapport. You have to be able to approach whatever problems they're having, be familiar with their process, and know them a bit better. There's a little bit of social engineering that goes involved in with that, just getting to know them. But it's one of those, as long as you can communicate with them and you know what their problems are, I feel better about helping them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what you're saying, getting to know the person, being a part of their business is a huge thing. But one of the things that we hear, like during discovery calls and sitting down and getting to know a customer sometimes, maybe they have a previous IT provider, or they currently have one, and they say stuff like, we don't know what they do, or we don't even know that guy's name. It's interesting, to hear that stuff. And it's not like you have to be best friends with everybody, but, if you're seeing them kind of regularly, you kind of know a little bit, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's been too many situations where I've been in a place where they just say, oh yeah, we've got one guy who knows a bit about computers, but he just hides in a back room all day. Yeah. When you have that, when you're questioning why they're there, it raises that question of why are they there?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I like talking with people to make sure that they know why I'm there, and I'm happy to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. So proactive, all right? Like, how do you balance being proactive with that communication versus being kind of overbearing, right? Because everybody's a little different. Maybe they want IT support, but they're like, no, I just want IT support when I want IT support and stuff like that. But there's also a lot of opportunity in being like, hey, how are things going? So how do you balance that?
Well, exactly as you just said. I don't think I could have said it any better. Reaching out to people and saying, "Oh, how are things going?" I've got a couple clients that I'm working with that really everything's running smooth.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to make sure they still have that notion of, in the event that there's a problem, Steve's going to be available.
Yeah.
So in my policy that I try to internalize is at least every 2 weeks, I'll try to check in with people, just say, oh, is everything going well? Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing's broken. 99% of the time, they say, nope, it's all good. But then that 1% of the time, I just know I'm going to get the question of, okay, hey, this has actually been acting weird, and I meant to text you, but can you help with this?
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those, I'm kind of farming for problems,
Sure.
where it's like, oh, I'm happy to help. That's what I'm here for. That's why I'm reaching out.
Yeah, it's like if I don't know, I can't help, which is awesome, and you're taking that initiative. And sometimes those little nagging things can like be a reflection on your service, even if you don't know that they're there. It's like, this thing keeps acting up. What do we pay IT for? It's like, well, you just let us know a little bit on some of this stuff. So that's good.
If you've ever been out to dinner and you didn't get a fork, are you just gonna sit there and internalize it, or do you want the waiter to come by and say, everything good?
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Oh, I love that. Yes, that is perfect. I'm picturing someone like internalizing that, just staring at their food like angrily right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Except now they're staring at a device that runs their business.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So with that being said, like sometimes you are going to be reactive because something just comes up. So how do you ensure that you have good customer service when something urgent happens?
Well, I mean, if someone's going to reach out with a problem, I mean, if I'm working on something else, you have to assess the priority of, okay, what I'm working on, they're not expecting for 2 weeks. I've got some time where I can put this aside and I can work on the immediate problem. Jumping over to that, I mean, I never have an issue with, because the other project's not going anywhere. It's got to get done too. So, I mean, sometimes you have to do that. Now, in a situation where you might have 2 problems come up, you have to look at the priority. You have to weigh out the customers on it. You have to communicate with them. Sometimes people will call in saying, hey, everything's down and I can't work. But you're already working with someone who says that they can't work.
Mm-hmm.
So have to look at it and say, hey, so it's about noon. Are you about to, take lunch? Mind if I, work on another problem as it's there? Even if they're going to be upset and say, hey, yeah, I need this up right away, but I am going to be away for 15 minutes. Depending on what the other problem is, might be able to just resolve it with a quick phone call, or at the very least say something like, okay, I'm at somewhere right now. I'll be over to you in 20 minutes.
Sure. I think the communication is the big thing, right? Like silence is the real big killer here, where it's just
Absolutely.
Your brain goes to like the worst possible scenario of what that person could potentially be doing. Like, oh yeah, they're sitting at their desk with their feet up right now, doing nothing, and I can't do anything here. So
Yep. Yeah, when you get that call, you have to be ready for it.
Sure. Now, I kind of want to bring something else up with customer service too, because there's obviously that responsiveness and the communication, but I mean, I've even fielded some of these calls where it's an emergency, but it's not really an emergency. And that's difficult to say because someone's asking you for service, and like you want to treat everything with the same level of urgency, but sometimes it's like, hey, this thing is broken and I need someone here now, but it's not really affecting the operations of their business. But for them, it's an urgent issue, and maybe you're doing something else. How do you communicate? Like, what do you think are the key factors to make that customer still feel valued when you're not going to be able to drop everything and go to it immediately?
Yep. In the kind of situation that could come up, like say someone's got a pretty wide workload and you are aware of that. As I'm talking with people, I'm going to be aware of that. I'm going to have a pretty good idea on what problems they might have. Mm-hmm. So if I can communicate with them and say, okay, hey, I know one program that you use isn't up and running right now, but I'm familiar enough with your workload to know that you probably have 1,000 other irons in the fire. Mm-hmm. Is there any way you can jump over to something else and then I can work on this is the second I have the availability? A lot of people I've found, they've always got something else cooking that they can get work done on. They can get that taken care of. So as long as you're communicating with them saying that, well, I'm fully aware that you're having a problem and it's a big problem, sometimes you need to put that out there where people can say, okay, makes a good point. I've got 3 other reports I need to do. I can worry about this one later.
Sure. I think that's probably beneficial too, where you're like, yeah, I know your business a little bit. Like, I know the other things you can do. It probably builds a little bit of trust in there too.
Exactly.
And the big thing is not belittling, not that you're going to belittle, but like making their problem less than what it is, right? Like, that's that communication aspect where it's, you want to see someone get more angry, just tell them like, that's not really that big of a deal.
Oh yeah, yeah. You never just want to talk to a user and say, "Oh, just calm down. It's not a big deal."
Yeah.
Worst thing you can do.
Yeah, being married, let me tell you, relax works wonders. If you just look at the person and say, relax,
just calm down.
Calm down.
That never ends badly.
Yes, it's a really good way to resolve something. No, I mean, like, go back to service industry, right? Somebody goes, hey, I want this sent back, and maybe there's like a speck of something on the side of their glass. They're like, not on the inside. They're like, I want a new glass of wine. It's like, okay, that's not a real issue, but you know what? Totally understand. I wouldn't want that either. Let me go take care of it. There's no win for saying like, that's not a real issue. We're not going to deal with it.
Yeah. The idea of being waited on, and someone comes by and just says, "Oh, it's not a problem," and they just pick it out of the glass. That sounds horrifying.
Oh yeah.
And that is the equivalent of the service industry. Oh, settle down.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's not a good thing.
Yeah. And there's that thing where it's like the customer's always right. I'm not going to say I don't really like that saying, especially as a consultant position, because like, there's a reason that you're a consultant. They might say, hey, we need to do this immediately. And you're like, that's not actually the right thing to do. And we can't do a Band-Aid fix here. It's going to cause later problems. But once again, communication.
Absolutely. The saying, if I'm not mistaken, I remember hearing this, it's the full saying is the customer's always right, ... in matters of taste.
Okay.
And that's always something that lives in the back of the head. But at the same time, serving the customer, you should always be doing that.
Yeah,
especially in a consulting position.
Yeah, anytime that you can do it, you're going to do it. So, what's the biggest mistake that you see other IT professionals kind of making when it comes to customer service?
Saying, we'll compromise on basic work. So some of the places I've been, they're willing to deal with, we'll say, lax security measures in favor of securing business. If I'm working with someone and they want to embrace a lax security method, I'm going to make my worry about it well known. I'm going to communicate all of that, because if they don't understand and it causes a problem further down the line, I'm the one who's going to be liable. They're going to question, why isn't why aren't you giving us proper security, when the problem is the fact that they have their passwords taped to their monitor.
Sure.
It creates a liability that isn't necessarily worth it. There can be a degree of compromise in the sense of, okay, we can help you out with this, but you need to make sure that you're securing yourself in other ways. Now, it's just in one example of like a password being taped to a monitor. I've talked to people who refuse to take it off of there.
Yeah.
For those people, the compromise is we set up multi-factor authentication. Okay.
Yeah.
That I found worked.
Well, that's interesting, because I feel like a lot of people might be afraid to have that conversation with individuals where, and they would look at it as bad customer service if you would tell them, hey, like, you need to compromise. But the interesting thing is you're in a consulting position, right?
Yeah. Especially as a consultant, a lot of people will treat you as disposable, and that's just the nature of the beast. So you're there to consult on their business. They're going to be the experts at their business. I'm the expert at mine. So I'm willing to give feedback where it's helpful. And don't get me wrong, I would love to secure business with whoever the individual is. But if they aren't going to work on basic problems as I'm telling them, then I'm not going to be able to give them the proper service that I feel they need.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's a totally different viewpoint than I would have, or a totally different answer than I would have thought. But like, you're looking at that, hey, if I need to give honest and clear feedback to deliver good customer service, for you, I was kind of thinking it might be that answer of, hearing somebody like field a call and going, oh, this again, or you know what I mean, like the long wait times and different things like that. Obviously, that's really easy stuff, but I like that different angle, how you look at it.
Yeah. Well, it's just part of the situation. You have to go into everything. You never know what to expect, but you have to go in hoping for the best, but prepared for the worst.
Mm-hmm.
When you have that conversation with someone, sometimes they're if someone's complaining about having a stomach ache all the time, maybe it's because they drink 2 gallons of milk every morning. Like, there's a part of it, they might need to stop doing something, and if they refuse to stop doing that, what can I do?
Yeah, yeah. You can lead them to water, but you can't make them drink, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about frustrated customers for a second. How do you take, this is one of my favorite topics, because working in customer service for so long, my favorite thing to do was to take the angriest customer and have them like you at the end of the interaction. I had this store manager, just gotta say this, who was the most charismatic person you'd ever meet. This is Walmart, so like sometimes the clientele would be interesting every once in a while.
Oh, yeah.
And someone would be at the front desk yelling and screaming, and he'd come over, and by the end of it, the person would like give them their phone number and, be inviting them over to a barbecue. And I go, how the heck did you do that? He was so good at it. So that's always been like one of my goals. How do you get that person to be not your friend, but essentially like that they're happy when they leave? So how do you take a frustrated IT customer and have them leave satisfied and happy?
Yeah. So I would say the first thing is most people, they just want to complain. Sometimes they just want to be mad. You have to let them vent. You have to let them get it out.
Mm-hmm. Don't say relax. No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
Don't tell them relax.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just need to get their gripes out.
Sure.
Maybe their previous provider, they were known to say, okay, we see that's a problem. We'll take care of it eventually. 2 weeks later goes by. They leave their current IT provider. They're now with them too. So if I set that expectation of we're the exact same as your previous one, the one that you got rid of, then what am I doing for me? I'm not helping myself nor the company out. So if I can communicate with them, hear their problems, and hear what exactly needs to be done to help make sure that we don't have this conversation again, where I don't want to hear that you're angry and not know how to fix it. So I'm going to do my best to try and get as much information to figure out what the problem is, resolve it for next time, and maybe we can automate a fix in the future, or I can give clear-cut documentation on what the problem is and how to fix it themselves.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think there was a couple different parts of that. I'm not going to cover it all, but right, like listening, big part. Just be quiet and listen for a second. Yeah. Because most of the time that can solve something. I love when you do that and you're like, at the end, it's like, okay, so what would you like me to do to remedy this? It's like, oh, I don't want anything. I just wanted to complain. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of easier than I thought. Yeah. And of course, there are ways to remedy things that, you should take proactive action on that. But then that other part was like that follow-up. Hey, what are we gonna do about it now? And what are we gonna do about it in the future? I think that goes a long way when it comes to building trust. Especially even like maybe we screwed up in some way, which is a possibility. We're human, right?
Yeah.
But then what is it that we're going to do different next time? Here's the action plan. We know and we care, and we're going to figure that out as well. So I feel like you answered this a little bit, but like where does empathy play when it comes to delivering great service?
Well, if you can empathize with a person's problems, you can help dig into them. You can help them understand where they're having a problem, and by empathizing with them you can understand it, and it just having that communication of this is what your problem is, this is how I can help, let me help. And people are very receptive to that. I mean, like we were just saying, most people, they just want to vent, they just want to complain. They can complain all they want, but I'm here to help. Let me help.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great conversation. What's one last thing that you would give to other IT pros out there that they could kind of focus on when it comes to delivering great customer service?
If IT is your first job, get a part-time job at a restaurant. Any restaurant. You can pick up short shifts at McDonald's, something like that gets you in front of people. It's extremely valuable in more than one way. Okay, you're getting part-time hours. Can't go wrong with that. But you're getting that personal experience. You're talking with people. when you're working IT, if you don't talk to people, you're going to be a quiet shut-in who no one knows why you're there, and that's when people have issues with IT. You're just the guy who's good with computers that no one knows how to talk to because he's from another planet. When you're in a position where, you're talking with people, if you can be relatable in any way, that goes infinitely farther. I say working service is a great way to do that because every day you're going to talk to a couple hundred people. It's not going to be consistent. You're going to be thrown left, right, center, every possible direction. Just be sociable.
Yeah.
You have to talk to people.
Yeah. Sounds like the reps really make a difference, right? Like getting in front of people, get those reps in, be flexible, be adaptable, and then listen, right? Be empathetic.
Yeah.
So.
You can go to the gym every day, but you can't skip personality day.
Can't skip personality day. Hey, it's another thing you have to develop, right? I mean, it's not going to get better unless you be intentional and work through it. So,
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, great. No, I'm happy that you're a part of our team and that you set a great example when it comes to customer service, and just sharing your knowledge with us. So. Yeah. With that being said, thank you for watching or listening to IT Unplugged. If you have any tech questions or, you're just looking for a place with great customer service, reach out to M2 Technology. We're here for you. Thanks.